Hello chess fans, this is Truxton analyzing the game between PoisonPawn and Feifo. This game was played in round 3 in the under 2200 section of ICC's League Team4545. And the game was incredibly complicated. It very well illustrates the French defense, I think, in its best form with White. White usually ends up with a weak d4 pawn, and in this variation, White just sacrifices it, to activate his pieces. So I think that's, probably the best way to handle a weak pawn is to sacrifice it for compensation with your pieces. And in the game, White just smashed Black off the board. Now, I think that's very interesting because I've had a lot of difficulties with the French defense. And they mainly stem from the fact that I don't like to have my pieces defending weak pawns. So in this game, I think it's instructive to see how PoisonPawn just sacrifices it for some gain in initiative and piece development. So let's get right into it. We see e4, e6, d4, d5, knight bd2. So this is the Tarrasch variation. Knight f6 and e5, advancing that e5 pawn forward, gaining space, and telling Black that this d4 pawn is going to be weak. Knight f d7, bishop d3. This is the main book line. c5 and c3. Knight c6, knight f3, queen b6. This definitely looks like the main line. Castles, c takes d4, c takes d4. Now, in this position, this is where we see the sacrifice of the weak d4 pawn. So in this position, if you look at the d4 pawn, we have only one defender on d4, with the queen on d1 as a potential defender, but there's two pieces in the way. The knight on d2 and the bishop on d3 are both in the way. And if you look at the black side, we have two attackers, the queen on b6 and the knight on c6. Because of that, Black can just take this pawn freely. But it's not free. Like I said, Black can take the pawn freely, but if you know these kinds of lines, then you know that White gets something in return for that. So I guess White's happy to give it away, and Black says, okay, I'll take it. White takes off the knight, and Black takes on d4. So we see a recapture here, where the queen has to capture on, or the queen has to recapture on d4. Now, I've heard somewhere before that a pawn is usually worth sacrificing if you get 3 tempos for it. And with those tempos should come some sort of development with your pieces, right? So that's the main idea here. So let's see what happened. We see knight f3, that's the best move. It defends the pawn on e5 while attacking the queen, gaining a tempo, right? That's one tempo he's gained, because now the queen has to move. And he's about to get another one really shortly with this bishop coming out to e3 and maybe the rook coming to the c-file. So we see queen to b6 and queen to a4. This was a really good move. This move, queen to a4, it threatens to do a lot of things. And I think that the general idea behind the move is maybe to play b4 later with the queen somewhere on the 4th rank defending the b4 square, and also to swing over here to one of these two squares, the h4 or the g4 square. And the reason why the queen can swing over there and that's good is that it puts pressure on the G and the H files, and just makes it really, really hard for Black to castle over there. So, and because the C file is opened up, it's not entirely clear how the Black king is going to castle on the queen side. So that's the idea with queen a4. We see queen b4 immediately addressing that and telling White, no, I think what I'm going to do is exchange queens off the board, and then maybe exchange off some other minor pieces. Maybe I can exchange off my my bad light-squared bishop, and then we're going to go to an endgame where I'm a pawn ahead. And that's exactly what black is saying with this move queen to b4, kind of trying to refute white's opening. But, you know, it took some time to go to b4, and of course white's not going to trade queens, so he plays queen to c2. Now, I don't think that queen to c2 is the best move because it allows knight to c5, attacking this light-squared bishop, and, you know, you really don't want to trade this knight for this light-squared bishop, I don't think, because this is a beautiful attacking piece if black ever decides to castle kingside. After knight c5, white can play bishop to d2 and further attack the queen, and then where's the queen going to go? I think the best square is a4, and here we get into some complicated lines with what do we see here? Wait a minute. Queen to a4. Okay. Queen to a4. Well, the idea with queen to a4 is to trade off the queens, and I'm wondering in this position how can white avoid the trade of queens. I'm not sure if he can avoid the trade of queens, but what he can do is he can play pawn to b4. That seems logical. The idea is that if the knight moves, then the white queen can take on a4, and if black takes on c2, then you play bishop takes c2, and you've preserved your light-squared bishop. So in this line, black does get the queens off, but there's still the minor pieces on, and this knight has to move. I'm not sure, you know, where this knight is going to go, actually. If the knight goes to e4 to attack this bishop, then we can just take it now. And what's funny is before we were moving back the bishop to not trade it, but now we're going to trade it willingly. And the reason is that after this pawn takes on e4, we can play knight g5. And it's not entirely clear how black is going to save this pawn on e4. Let's say he plays bishop to e7, and then we take on e4, and, you know, white got his pawn back plus space, right? So that looks reasonable for white to play. Maybe because black has the bishop pair, that's enough to compensate for white's space. And the reason why white has more space is because he has a pawn on e5, right? And a pawn on b4, which gives him this beautiful space. But, you know, maybe without queens on the board, maybe black can arrange an exchange of rooks and try to neutralize some of that. But it looks playable. If we go back to the main line, though, that's not what happened. Knight c5 was not played. And in the main line, black played queen c5. And, you know, his idea is he wants to trade queens. He could have traded queens by going into the knight c5 line, unless I'm missing something. In this position, obviously, white's not going to trade queens. He plays queen to e2. And now this queen is misplaced, right? It's on the c-file. And it's going to be tempoed with a rook coming. So we're going to see these tempos coming up. Bishop to e7, black plays, and white plays bishop to e3, tempoing the queen immediately. Black can't really play d4 here because there's too many attackers on it. So he moves the queen, and then we see the tempo with rook to c1, and then queen to b8. So, if we wanted to, what we could do is count up exactly how many tempos white gained by sacrificing that pawn. And we could also just look at the position in general and make a general observation that says that white has more pieces developed than black, but he's down a pawn. So white has the initiative and black has an extra pawn. That's what's going on here. I think in this position I would rather be on the white side simply because it's much easier to play. You know, look at all these pieces in the black camp just cramped back there on the back rank. So let's proceed. In the game we see bishop to d4. I don't think that's the best move, but it's a good move. What I was looking at was maybe knight d4. And the reason why I was thinking knight d4 is that you want to go over here to b5 and then threaten to come into c2 or d6. That's the general idea. But the move he played is fine. Bishop to d4. They're both good moves. and we see b6. The idea is to get this bishop out and maybe exchange it off, or you know, just clear the back rank and develop your pieces. Maybe he could have castled there, but I'm not entirely sure. There might be a Greek gift in there somewhere. Alright, so we see pawn to a3, and if you look at White's clock here, after Black played pawn to b6, White spent 10 minutes, almost 10 minutes, let's see, 43 minutes left to 35 minutes left. So he spent about 8 minutes to play a3. That's a good chunk of your clock. So there must have some purpose behind this move, and actually there is. There's a lot of purpose. What Black is saying with this move, pawn to b6, is that he wants to bring his knight or his bishop to c5. And now that the pawn is on b6, it's supported, and if White ever takes on c5, then what Black can do is put a pawn on c5. That's what Black wants to do. He wants to put a pawn on c5. And if a pawn goes to c5, then we'll see you know, a potential 2 connected passed pawns in the center of the board. And also, when the b pawn goes to c5, then the queen is opened up on the b file, and maybe there's some justice for it there. So that's the idea, and that's why White played a3. The idea is that he wants to play b4 and address that situation on c5. So a3 is very logical. And we see bishop c5. I think, again, I would have chose to put the knight there, simply because you want to trade this bishop for this knight. And where would the bishop go? Now, what's funny is that this move, knight to c5, it's a great move. And the reason why it's a great move is that what you're threatening to do is when the bishop moves, say to c2, then Black has bishop to a6. And what that move does is it skewers the queen and the rook. Now, unfortunately for Black, in this position, White has a saving move. He can play bishop to a4 check, and then in this position, Black does not have pawn to b5. Because after he plays pawn to b5, then we can just take on c5, and then there's nothing defending the bishop on a6. So he doesn't have b5, he's got to move the king. So king b8, and he can't block with the knight because then we just take on a6. So after king f8, we can see bishop to b5, and the queen and the rook are not skewered. So in this position, there was room for mistake with White. In this position, after knight to c5, if White played bishop to b1, with the idea of not blocking the c-file, then what Black can do is play bishop to a6 and win immediately, because he's winning the exchange here. There's no defense. You know, earlier we were giving a check on a4, but here there isn't a defense. So knight c5 is interesting. The move that he played in the game, bishop to c5, is absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with that move. You know, it has the same kind of plans. Here we see rook e1 putting more pressure on e5 and making it hard for Black to play f6. And we see a5 stopping White's pawn to b4 move. So this game is very well played. You know, both sides are creating plans and trying to neutralize their opponent's plans. And so we lift a rook, and this is a really good move because what it says to Black is that after this bishop moves and this knight moves, then the rook can swing over here to h3 or g3 and help in a kingside assault, because in this position White anticipates that Black is going to castle kingside, and after Black does castle kingside, there might be some Greek gifts and some situations with sacrifices and swinging rooks over. And so we see bishop to e7, defending against a Greek gift. That was a really good move. Rook f to c1. White is already doubled on the c file. Castle short, and here there's no Greek gift because Black is controlling the g5 square. Pawn to h4, supporting a bishop bishop takes h7 check Greek gift, because now after knight to g5, we're going to see that this pawn is going to come to g5, and with the pawn on g5, So many tactics happen. Alright, so knight c5, he sees the idea. But now we see bishop takes h7 check, and ouch. I mean, this is just absolutely such a good move. You know, it's very well calculated. If you look at the clock time, in this position, PoisonPawn's clock was at 26 minutes and 42 seconds. And after he played the move, bishop takes h7 check, you know, he spent it looks like 10 minutes to play this move. So it's very well calculated, and it's a very good move. So we see king takes h7, and then knight g5 check. Now, in this position, I don't know if king to h6 is a playable move. Probably not, because what white can do is play bishop to e3, and then there's tactics. I'm not sure about what if black plays pawn to d4 here. Reason being, when the knight moves with check, we can take the bishop, and if the bishop takes on d4, yeah, I'm not so sure about this position. I don't know if black can take the knight freely. I really don't know. This is just a crazy line. So I don't know if king to h6 is a safe move. You would have to really spend some time analyzing that. You know, worst case scenario, after king to h6, we don't have to put a bishop on e3. A lot of times in chess, you can do the same kind of thing two different ways. So here we can play queen d2, and that does the same thing, you know, getting on this diagonal, but without moving the bishop. I'm not sure what black would do here. He might be lost, I really don't know. But back to the main line, in the game, black took that knight off, and then white gets a pawn on g5. Now, if we take stock of the position here, what we have is, first let's look at the pawns. White has 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 pawns, and black has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pawns. So white managed to get his pawn back, and the number of pawns on the chessboard are equal. And now, with this pawn from h4 going over to g5, we see that white has a semi-open h-file, which he didn't have before. And now, after looking at the pawns, let's look at the minor pieces. White has one minor piece on d4, and technically it's a bad piece. It's a bad bishop, because his center pawn on e5 is of the same color, restricting the movement of his bishop. And if we look on the black side of the board, black has two minor pieces, a good knight on c5 and a bishop on c8, which might be black's bad piece because his light squares are on the same color of it. So in this position, and you know, white has two rooks, black has two rooks, and they both have queens. So in this position, white is down a whole piece. He has sacrificed a whole piece, and white has said to black, I have enough to checkmate you. So that's the battle going on. And so we see pawn to g6. That's a great move. It's a move that anticipates that white is going to swing a rook over or swing a queen over. First of all, playing this move g6, it controls the h5 square, so the queen cannot go to h5. And also it creates a square on g7 that the king can go to if it needs to find further shelter. So this move g6 is good. We see rook h3 check, king g7, and queen to f3. Now, this move queen to f3, it's an inaccurate move, and in this position, I would like you all to pause the video and ask yourself, what would you do if you were white in this position? Okay, you've paused the video. I welcome you all back. In this position, I think it's possible to play rook takes knight, and the reason why I think it's possible is that after let's say pawn takes rook, we can play queen f3, and there's really no defense to queen f6 check in this position. You know, then threatening a checkmate on h8. I'm pretty sure that black would have to play pawn to f6, But after that happens, we just take with the e-pawn, and you know, this is just mayhem on the chessboard. You know, White's winning here. I mean, after, where's the king going to go? Let's say king f7. There's a few different things we can do here. We can take on c5. We can give a check with the rook. You know, let's turn the engine on in this position and just see what the evaluation is. Oh yeah, it's thinking the same thing. So it says that the best move is to take on c5, and Black's flat out lost. There's no defense to the tactics. I'll let you guys look into it. But in the main line, White played queen to f3 immediately, and that's inaccurate because it allows Black to play knight to d7, which defends the f6 square. And so this kind of stuff, like, you have to understand that, you know, the move queen to f3, it threatens to give a check on f6. So in Black's mind, he's going to want to defend that square. So if you're White, in this position, you're going to try to, you know, think of the moves that stop his ideas. And the move rook takes knight would have definitely done that in this position. But you know, White's clock is getting a little low, and he just didn't see it. No big deal. It happens to the best of us. He played queen f3, and then Black defended the square. Then we see queen to f4. This is a good move. What queen to f4 does is it plans to go over here and threaten a nasty checkmate. And so we see bishop to a6. This was a really good move. What bishop to a6 does is it clears the back rank so that all these pieces that are on it now can defend the h8 square, and can also now Black can bring a rook over to h8 and try to neutralize the semi-open h-file. And actually now it's not even semi-open. Maybe it never was. Maybe it was always open. Because if you see, both sides have access to this h-file, so it's an open h-file. In the game, we see rook to c3, trying to pile up on the c-file. Or I'm sorry, on the h-file. Alright, so in this position, Black played queen to d8. And I guess what he's doing is he's controlling the f6 square, and that's just a flat-out blunder. So go ahead and pause the video, and in this situation, what would you do for White? Okay, you paused the video and you resumed. Welcome back to the chess game. And in this position, White has a devastating move. It's rook h7 check. Double exclam. In this position, Black is hopeless because after king takes rook, we play queen to h4 check, and when the Black king moves, then we can force him to go backwards, right? So if the king goes to g7, then we have queen h6 check, and when this king moves to g8, we can play rook h3, and there's absolutely no defense to the coming checkmate. In this position, the Black king will be checkmated. Now, going back to the main line, in the main line, so I just turned my engine off because because I'm not even using it. You know what I mean? I had turned it on earlier to see an evaluation number, but I don't need it. All right. So in this position, White is winning with rook h7 check, and ouch, you know, the king is going to be checkmated. But he played rook to c6, and that's a good move. It plans to double up on the h file. So you know, got to give him credit for that. In the game, Black played rook to h8, trying to neutralize that file, and then we see a doubling. Black took it. I'm not sure if that's best because it allows White to advance his g5 pawn, and he took back. And now this move, king to f8, might be a blunder. And the reason why I think it might be a blunder is that it allows this pawn to just march forward, right? I mean, I think that maybe this move, king to g8, is probably better. Because after White gives a check, then we can play king to h8, stopping this pawn. And if the queen takes on f7, then in this position, I think that Black can hold down the fort because he can play queen to e8, and now the white queen can't take on g6, and has to go somewhere or trade queens where his attack is kind of stopped cold turkey. I guess that white would play rook f3, and then when the queen takes, just move this knight, and black's gonna develop somewhere, somehow. In this position, I think that white's lost. There just isn't enough firepower to continue. So the move that he played, king to f8, is, I think, a blunder because it allows white to play h7, and now there's really just no defense to the eventual trade of now black's giving some wood back, right? Black is going to give his queen for the rook and the pawn, and now white's sacrifice is fully justified because he not only has material back for giving away the bishop on h7, but he has a really nice position. So after king g7, we see that black has to give some wood back, and so he takes, and then the rook takes happily, and now we see rook takes rook, and in this position, black has a really good move. Or, I'm sorry, white has a really good move. So go ahead and pause the video and see if you can find the move that PoisonPawn found. Okay, pause the video. Alright, you've paused the video, and welcome back. In this position, white has a deflection tactic. This whole thing about trying to remove this knight from the defense of f6, that's coming in here a lot because this knight is the only piece that can defend f6. So what white does here is he plays bishop takes b6 exclamation point. Great move. Because after knight takes bishop, we see queen f6 check, and the only move that makes any sense is to move the king now because you're in check, and then we win back the knight. And in this position, I think that black is dead lost because not only do you win the knight back, but you get the pawn on a5. And that's very important because after you get that pawn on a5, and now the winning is kind of, the method of winning is extremely clear because we have two pawns on a3 and b2 that are just going to run up the board. I mean, they're just going to run up the board, and we're going to get a queen. So in this position, the game's, it's obviously theoretically won for white, I think. So black tries to hold on with rook to c8, and then we see b4, giving a check, and then getting behind the passed pawn with the rook. Probably a good move. a4, rook b2. Let's go ahead and threaten some more pawns, I guess. I guess that's what black wants to do. Maybe eye up with the king. So white moves his king and defends his pawn on f2. And we see rook a1 getting behind this passed pawn. b5, bishop c2, attacking this pawn. Now in this position, I think this idea was good for black. I think, to find this kind of idea of coordinating your only two pieces to attack one of white's passed pawns is definitely worthy of looking into. We see queen c3. Bishop takes a4, b6, and now I'm asking myself, how is black going to stop that pawn? So he was able to coordinate his pieces to take one of white's passed pawns, but unfortunately for him, it's going to be so hard to stop the passed b pawn. And the reason why it's going to be so hard to stop is that the queening square on b8 is of a dark color, when this bishop on a4 is of a light color. So, it just didn't work out for black here. And so we see rook c2 threatening the queen. Oh man, ouch. And we can just take this rook. Oh, that's just so strong. After the queen takes the rook here, we see bishop takes rook and b7, and it's absolutely clear in this position that that white is just flat out winning. This queen is happening and it's over. So, this was a great game. It was very well played. You got to give credit to Feifo for accepting the pawn sacrifice and trying to hold down the fort while castling kingside right into the storm of bishop takes h7 check and trying to handle it freely. You got to give credit for going into that line. And white also, you played a great game. In this position, you just crushed black. So, congratulations on winning that game. And also, I'd like to congratulate PoisonPawn for winning the round 1 nomination. Congratulations, you won Game of the Week on round 1. Your game was absolutely spectacular. But as long as I'm thinking about the right game, let me just check to make sure I'm not congratulating the wrong person here. I hope not. Let's see here. One of these games in the Game of the Week. What I'm doing is I'm just checking. The Game of the Week thread to make sure that PoisonPawn is indeed the winner before I go off and congratulate him. Let's see. Is that the same one? Wait a second. Look at this. I'm glad I checked. Okay. PoisonPawn, I was getting you and another person confused. The winner of Game of the Week for round 1 is between Universe and Mike A. Wait a minute. Was that the one? Gosh. Sorry, guys. Hold on one second. Let me make sure that I'm finding the right one here. There's so many games that it's just... Okay. Wait a minute. I know what game it is. Okay, apparently I don't know what game it is. All right. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Who was it? I'm sorry, PoisonPawn, and I'm sorry, Universe and Mike A. Universe and Mike A. Is that the winner? See, I know the game. I just don't know the name. So let me find. Let me find the game here. Universe and Mike A. All right, there it is. Let's see if this is the game. Yep, this is the game. This is the winner right here. This game was absolutely amazing. This game was spectacular, and it very well illustrates, I think, a Game of the Week. Yeah. So, Universe Mike A. Hey, you guys won Game of the Week. Congratulations. It was a great game, and I'm sure that all the listeners and all the League45 members learned from this game. I sure did, and I want to thank all of you guys for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.